Hey there friends, welcome back to another Legally Armed America video. I'm of course Paul Glasgow here, the one and only truth pimp, dealing you a vulgar display of logic and reason on a daily basis. Today, July 5th, the day after Independence Day. And I bring that up because it's super important, because I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that we have rights that are protected in this country that we were born with. They're just recognized by our founding fathers, more specifically the Constitution, right? These aren't rights that the government gave us, so the government can't take them away. In other words, they were never the government's rights, they were always ours. Again, the Constitution and Bill of Rights were written to recognize those rights and to put restrictions in place to where the government could not infringe upon those rights. So it's a recognition of rights, and it's essentially a rule book, supposed to be, to the federal government saying this is how far you can go, and then you have to stop at this point. It's very important that we understand that we are very, very, very unique in that we have these rights and other countries do not. One country that you might consider a Western type country that's very similar to us would be Australia. Now you guys know that back in 1996 there was a quote mass shooting that took place in Port Arthur in Australia, and that essentially put the end to normal private ownership of firearms. At that point, pretty much anybody could own pretty much whatever they wanted. And because they don't have a Second Amendment, after that shooting, the politicians were able real quick to put the kibosh on these people being able to have firearms at will in that country.
A top secret location seen only by a select few, even within the police force. This is the last line of defence to stop firearms getting into the wrong hands. Some of the guns here have been surrendered. Others, including this 3D printed semi-automatic, were seized in Western Sydney. This facility churns out 1.5 tonnes of crushed guns every month. Today, this ammunition arrived from a property in northern New South Wales. Each of these 8-kilo buckets filled almost to the brim.
Every gun that's destroyed means less opportunity for those to end up in the wrong hands of criminals.
New South Wales is seeing a rise in violent organised crime fuelled by the illegal drug trade.
I thought that's interesting the way they say fueled by the illegal drug trade, but drugs aren't the problem. Wait, if it's an illegal drug trade, that means they're breaking the law. So once again, the idiots fall into the same trap that we must be having, quote, gun violence because of guns. Meanwhile, all these other laws that they're breaking, they don't seem to be as worried about those. Like, they're not asking to pass another drug law to outlaw drugs more. Outlaw drugs more than what they're already outlawed, right? How stupid does that sound? Same thing with guns. Of course, again, Australia doesn't have the Constitution that we have, so they were just able to trample on everybody's rights at will. Now, I wanted to show some things that spell out where Australia is, because a lot of times these people, they manipulate these numbers, and what they're putting out there is not real. So I kind of took a little bit of a deep dive over the last evening or so, pulling numbers from Australia based on that 1996 happening that took place where they started to ban firearms, and just, I guess, the present in general. First charts I'm going to show you that I put together show changes in violent crime between 2022 and 2023. These are the most recent numbers that I could find from Australia. As you can see here, assaults percentages were up 7.63% from 2022 to 2023. Again, private firearm ownership likely could stop, prevent, or at least deter that. Sexual assaults are up 7.94% from 2022. Robberies up 11%. Unlawful entry up 6%. Motor vehicle theft up 10%. Again, this is from 2022 to 2023. And finally, this is domestic violence up 3% from 2022. Now, you're probably thinking the same thing I am. How do we compare this to when guns were actually outlawed? What's that trend look like? Because again, we're simply looking at 2023 to 2022. I guess you could theoretically say maybe gun crime was way down and then it just happened to spike during that 1 year period of time. I'm one step ahead of you. I pulled some charts and some data also from 1996 up until now. This is even more eye-opening. You notice that assaults are up 62.93%. 62.93% since they enacted gun control in Australia. That alone is enough for me to say that was a bad move. But yeah, 62% increase since 1996. Let's move on to the next one. Look at this. Sexual assault. You don't think there's a war on women in Australia? Yeah, it looks like banning firearms made women a lot more at risk of being sexually assaulted. Those sexual assaults are up 87.59% since they enacted gun control in Australia. Now looking at robbery, because those other numbers are so high, this looks like a low number. But still, robberies are up 20%. So again, it looks like a low number because the other numbers are so massive, but 20% is not acceptable. And look at this final number over here. This is domestic violence. This, to me, I really would need to see some digging on this. Domestic violence is up 200%. I don't know how that correlates with outlawing private firearms, because in most cases, your domestic violence offenders are people who obtain their firearms legally to begin with. I'm talking about in Australia or elsewhere. So that's an interesting number right there to see such a massive spike in those. But again, all these numbers that you see here are all increases, percentage increases, since that 1996 gun ban in Australia. Now, interestingly, you heard just a quick blurb in that first clip where they mentioned 3D printed guns. By looking at the numbers that I just showed you, that shows that the gun control laws that they put in place in Australia were a mistake, clearly, because they've contributed to a massive spike in crime since 1996. So they can't admit that the legislation that we implemented on knee-jerk reaction based on feelings alone was a bad idea. We have to find another boogeyman. So because those numbers are rising in spite of this stupid law that we put in place, what could it possibly be? Let's blame something. Let's blame those 3D printed guns.
The weapons of choice are changing.
The trends are that organised crime are becoming increasingly involved in manufacturing firearms parts, in selling firearms, and largely some of the firearms that are being sold are 3D printed.
At the Police Ballistics Centre, examples of every type of gun, both legal and illegal, are kept. In just the last 5 years, the officers here have seen designs for 3D printed guns go from a simple single-use weapon to a semi-automatic hybrid.
What you see here is the single-shot version. They've gone to multi-shot to increase the capability. And then what they found was that they were too weak to be practical. So in the next generation, the FGC9 model you see here, they addressed those weaknesses by making metal internal components with a plastic outer body.
The FGC9, which stands for F Gun Control, is now among the most common 3D printed weapon found by police. Its blueprints are easily accessible online, and they can be made for just $600.
Well, I got you guys covered there too. Yet data is pretty reasonably easy to find online these days, and I'm a numbers nerd, so I found those numbers also regarding 3D printed guns. So based on what they're talking about, you would think that there's a massive spike in 3D printed gun use, and of course, if they're used in crimes, where are they found? Crime scenes. How else would you know they're used in a crime unless you found them at a crime scene? So that's the determining factor, right? If they're not found at crime scenes, then there's no evidence that they're being used. So you can't go by their lies and say, oh, we think there's 10,000 3D printed guns out there. In fact, in this report, they actually said that they think they have 200 and something thousand illegal guns. And of course, a lot of those they're trying to attribute to 3D printed guns. And again, I'm using Australia's terminology when I say illegal guns. Those numbers are not spiking. I'm talking about the use of 3D printed guns. That is a story that they're putting out to try to, again, distract you from the fact that the gun ban was a mistake and it doesn't work. Because of the spike in crime, now they're trying to redirect without showing you those numbers in that same report that they just showed. Notice they don't show any statistics or data. It's okay. I got it. 3D printed guns seized at crime scenes in Australia from 2018 to 2024. And the reason why I pulled those numbers is because prior to 2018, there was none, like there was zero. So there was no data to show anyway, because 3D printed guns were not being proliferated, and the use of them and the making of them, it just wasn't out there before 2018. So that's why my numbers start at 2018. So we are looking at the last 6 years worth of data here. Our lowest number over here, and again, these are all in specific areas. That's how low these numbers are. In 2022, there was 1. That's our lowest number. 1. 1. Sounds like a crisis. Our next chart goes up to 2. That was in 2021. Again, 2. Then 3. Then we found 3. That was 2018. That's the first year that they came on the scene. 3. A total of 3. 2020, we had 5 total. And of course, the big number. 2024, last year, there was 21 total 3D printed guns seized at crime scenes in the entire country of Australia. You could seize 21 3D printed guns in the trunk of a car in Chicago tonight if you went and looked for them. This is not a problem. This is a failed attempt at a cover-up in a country trying to show you that our failed policies can't possibly be the reason why crime is elevating. It must be something else. So let's blame something else, but these are how the numbers bear out. It is not a problem. If you combined all of these, you got 32 or 33 3D printed guns in the last 6 years. That's an average of between 5 and 6 per year. 5 and 6 per year. That means you go every 2 or 3 months without even finding one. So once again, to be clear, we live in an absolutely great country in the United States. Other countries that fancy themselves as being ahead of us in providing safety or perceived safety for the citizens of those countries are just wrong. They cite statistics, yet they don't count them properly. They try to cover things up. I wonder if the citizens of Australia know these numbers that I just shared with you right here, because they've done a really good job in that country of covering everything up to give the appearance that that was a good move back in 1996, when clearly it was an absolutely failed effort. Guys, thank you so much for watching my videos. I appreciate when you do that. Please like, subscribe. Please share the videos if you get a chance, because usually they're demonetized, and when they're demonetized, they get that old black eye, and YouTube doesn't allow those to bust out through the algorithm unless you guys share them enough to where it breaks out of that algorithm shell that they've had them contained in. So please like, subscribe, and share those if you don't mind to like-minded people and maybe not like-minded people. Because I think videos like this, where you actually show the numbers and the data, it's available to everybody. There's no secret place that I went to get this. I got it online. That if you show people this kind of stuff and they can go vet those numbers out themselves and see that we are telling them the truth, sometimes that might change a mind or two, right? Sometimes I believe it does. I believe whenever you can deliver the truth to somebody and not twist those numbers in any kind of way, and then somebody thinking that they can, in a snarky kind of way, I'm going to go find these numbers to debunk his argument, and then they basically just confirm what I'm saying is right. That might not change your mind, but it might shut somebody up out there who might be willing to or want to try to run their mouth and spread the lies that the left is spoon-feeding them. They can go find out the truth themselves and quietly fade away with the truth in hand. This week, they released the Speed Racer MP5 t-shirt. This thing is absolutely awesome. I'm going to provide the link in the description down below. Go get you one, because there are limited quantities, but you can get them now. They are available. They just dropped this week. The legally owned American MP5 Speed t-shirt. Check them out now. Again, go to TriStar. The link is in the description down below.